Two friends meet up to drink some beers and talk about past times. Not yesterday, but long ago, it's scandals, wars and crimes. From Stalin's reign to Prohibition, Tudors, Pompey, Bush and NASA's mission, Edison's Bulk, Genghis Khan's rise to victory. Forget your old teacher, it's time for Pint-Sized History.
Hi there, and welcome to Pint-Sized History. I'm Joe.
And I'm Zack.
And we're here again for part 2 of our Henry V story. And you know something that I've just remembered now? We started in season 1 this idea of rulers and leaders, this idea of following one person's life as they do. And we did it with Oda Nobunaga in feudal Japan. A great episode.
I love that. Didn't do so well in terms of viewership.
It didn't do that well. It was underrated. And since then, we've not really touched it since. No. But now we're doing back-to-back ones. And we haven't actually mentioned this is a rulers and leaders. And yeah, Henry V is a very influential leader.
I'm kind of upset that you brought that up because I wanted to do away with the mini-series of rulers and leaders.
Oh, I like the idea.
Oh, you liked it?
Well, I just like the idea of when we talk about a certain person, this is how we define it, rulers and leaders. Because I think they're interesting. You know, the similarities between Nobunaga, Alexander the Great, and Henry V are actually really similar in a lot of ways, especially how young they started. Or how
very true. I didn't think about that.
Yeah, so I think that there's lots of things you can notice between all of them. But anyway, yeah, we're back, and I just would like to say again, like we did in the last episode.
This is too informal. As you know, on Pint-Sized History, we like to have we discuss all the landmark events that shape the world we lived in.
We don't need to
but
say
we
that.
do it over a refreshing alcoholic beverage.
We do indeed. And like last week's episode, because we're not filming this literally right after the other one, we are very thankful that Crate have offered to give us some free beers to sample and to talk about.
Yeah, go get yourself a Crate, or if not, go to the pub there in Hackney. And when you do order from the bar, say you came because of Pint-Sized History.
Oh, please do that. Yeah,
and they
Jesus.
might actually,
That'll give us brownie points.
Yeah,
oh, yeah. If you live near Hackney, do that. Do it tomorrow.
We might start getting a bit more than beers.
Catch
my drift.
This comes out on a Thursday. Tomorrow's Friday. If you live near Hackney, go over there and say, "Oh, I just listened to that Pint-Sized History. It was so good, man. You guys must have some tasty beers. I'll take the pale ale."
You have to start the conversation like that as well.
Exactly, word for word, verbatim. Otherwise, it's not going to work.
No.
Anyway, Zack, Henry V.
Amazing. So where were we last time?
I believe we're about to enter Francais.
Let's recap very quickly.
Okay.
So we spoke a lot about the Plantagenet Dynasty.
Yes.
How Henry V has come to power against a backdrop of rebellions.
Very simple.
And plots and revolts.
All of it.
And he's now cemented himself as the rightful ruler of England. But he's still got something to prove.
A bit of stability after these years of turbulence. Thank God for this boy king.
You seem really excited right now.
I love King Hal. Let's go.
Prince Hal and King Henry.
Yeah.
Don't you dare conflate our lovely English king with this, boyish prince. He's a legend now. He's the man of the moment.
He's still the boy king to me. Timothy Chalamet, I think part of the reason I think of him in this way is because Timothy Chalamet is so young looking in the movie, but it makes it more epic in a way. It's like this king that looks and feels so young is able to do all these feats in history with such a dramatic way. It just... honestly, we mentioned it obviously in the last episode. If you haven't seen Netflix's The King, it is a really interesting look into this. And some of it obviously is a bit made up and a bit fictiony, but I will say it's really enjoyable and a good way to get into history if you're into this type of medieval
It's also
stuff.
fairly historically accurate as well. There's some obviously big omissions and big breaks that they take, and they give themselves a lot of leeway in some of the things they discuss.
But the vibe and the ambience is so good. The soundtrack to it is unbelievable. Probably my favourite scene is when I'm sure you might
the trebuchets
in the middle of the movie when they siege a castle at the beginning of their journey into France, and the trebuchets fly over in the night, and you see the flaming balls, and the music is so orchestral.
Historically inaccurate.
I'm sure it's completely fake, but it feels like what it would be.
It does feel
good, and I love that. It's one of my favourite scenes in any historical movie, even if it's complete bullshit.
He's now turned his eyes to France, and he wants to prove his claim to the French kingdom. And I said to you before, he was a religious man. He believes that divine right guides him, and that by proving himself on the battlefield and winning these wars, he's expressing God's own determination that he is the rightful ruler and the rightful man for these areas, like what happened with Prince Owain Glyndŵr in Battle of Shrewsbury in Wales. He wants to prove this on an immense scale by invading France, and he pursues the claim held by Edward III, which is why I talked about him so much previously. This is through his great-grandfather by his mother's side, Isabella. He claims this is justification for the war in France and uses that as his cause, or his casus belli, I think as you call it. I think that's a Latin for cause of war, maybe. Because bellicose, bellicose, because bellicose is war.
I don't actually know what casus belli means, but yeah,
You should know. You said yesterday you speak Latin.
I didn't say that.
Last week's episode, not yesterday.
How dare you say that? No, I did not say I speak Latin. I actually, when I was editing the last episode on Alexander the Great, I was listening to me talk about Latin. I was like, I wish I'd worded that slightly differently, because I do not speak Latin, and I speak nothing like Latin. It was just that I meant the basic phrases and words I can sometimes understand because I speak Italian. Casus belli, meanwhile, I have no idea. So I think
it means case of war.
Yeah, it just means basically that you've got an excuse to fight, and it's what people need if they're going to go to war.
What's the default text on any website that hasn't been created yet? It's like Lupsus Iro Morum or something like that.
I have no idea.
Sounds like I was summoning
what is that? What are you talking about?
Ghost or something.
What the hell?
No, man, no.
We're talking about Henry V. I didn't realise we were chanting an incantation. We're bringing in some fucking ghosts in this place. What's going on here? Where's your Ouija board, man?
No, don't scare me, man. I don't want to get anywhere near a Ouija board. Fuck that. Essentially, all the nobles, everyone in the court, they all believe this is a great idea. Let's get over there. Let's give them a good bashing. Let's take over France. I'm glad you didn't smile when I said give them a good bashing.
Why would I smile? Nothing
I felt like that was a poor use of words. And the first stop for Henry was to cross the English Channel and land on French soil.
Not easy.
And construct a beachhead from which he would conduct future operations from, or maybe even just a piece of land they could now make English territory. And he landed at Chef-en-Caux with 1,500 ships and a force of 2,300 men-at-arms and 9,000 longbowmen. Mm-hmm. And they besieged the French port of Harfleur in Normandy, which is in the King's film, the first castle that they take, which is
Harfleur.
But not with trebuchets, with cannons. They have cannons now. Wow. And Henry loves cannons. He's utilised them loads in the campaign in Wales to attack castles and break down the walls with cannons. And that's a nice distinction there. But before this, he had to justify his course of war. So in 1414, there were negotiations around whether he would or would not invade. He wanted the French to pay him 1.6 million crowns and concede ownership of Normandy, Touraine, Anjou, Brittany and Flanders, as well as Aquitaine, which is enormous. I was about half of France at the time. The French responded with an offer of 600,000 crowns and most of Aquitaine. So they didn't want war. Like the French nobles and nobility at the time kind of knew that, because they were so internally fighting, disputing.
Bad timing.
Yeah, they didn't want Henry coming in and ripping apart everything.
Yeah.
And it's rumoured that the French ridiculed Henry's offer as well, which kind of where in the King film and I don't know if it's in the Shakespearean adaptation as well, but they present him with a bull.
Yes. And
suggest that he is just but a boy who needs a bull to go play catch with or something. And by December 1414, Henry persuades Parliament to grant him a huge amount of money to pursue the campaign. They agreed, and in 1415 asked him to sanction war, which they did again. Like I said, the first part, he's a shrewd manipulator and works really well at getting people to give him what he wants. And that's something that every king really needs at this point in time. And then we come to Harfleur.
Harfleur.
Yeah.
They don't pronounce the H.
Don't they?
Harfleur.
It'll be Harfleur.
Henri.
I think it's Harfleur.
They don't pronounce the H in French.
I think with an A afterwards, it's ha. But with an E, it's on or he.
Well, we'll find out.
Well, they have a French name is Henry, Henri.
Henri.
No, Henry as a first name.
Henri.
With an I rather than a Y.
Yeah.
We're getting bogged down in...
I'm in French, they don't pronounce the H.
So, Harfleur.
Harfleur.
Nah. If any French fans, they can come into our comment section. So, for the siege of Harfleur, Henry had amassed his army of 11,000 men. And at Harfleur, or Harfleur, as you may prefer, there was a garrison of only 100 men. And while he learned considerably from his campaigns in Wales about besieging cities and castles, this took a long time. He brought his cannons to the walls, tried to take them down.
Biggest problem
but
with the siege.
It took about a month. It was a successful siege.
But it's just the more time you waste on a siege, the more everything becomes a problem.
Absolutely,
you don't want it.
You got to worry about people attacking your camps, about armies turning up and fighting you while you're set up attacking this castle.
Yeah, you could be completely screwed if an army takes you from behind.
And it took longer than they thought. It took them about a month to take the city, which they thought they captured in a matter of days or weeks. And in doing so...
It costs morale, it costs supplies, it costs money. It's like the worst thing, a siege, if you can't get it done relatively quickly.
So they then took Harfleur on 22nd September, after arriving there at the end of August. And on the 8th of October, they finally left the city. But in doing so, He also left a garrison of about 300 men and 900 archers just to make sure they keep the town from the French armies maybe coming back to conquer it again. But his army, while sieging the castle, suffered an intense bout of dysentery. And dysentery is a common thing in medieval armies and camps. It is rife. Just disease.
Not just medieval warfare. Dysentery happens in the Napoleonic Wars. It happens in World War One heavily. It's like a huge problem that armies have to deal with.
I don't think anyone really thinks about how crippled armies can be by the cold, disease, illnesses,
just being stuck
lack of
together.
Supplies.
Stuck together in a situation where you don't have enough warm clothes is like
no toilets, no sewage systems, like hardly any food. They're also suffering, so they need to get on with this quickly. So he's now got an exhausted, broken army. He may have only up to half his troops. We're not really sure how many troops he has that are fit and ready for fighting. But from the 11,000 troops, he's certainly lost 1,000 for the garrison at Harfleur, and maybe a couple more thousand because of dysentery and disease, and so he's leaving Harfleur with a great success in taking the castle town, but he's also leaving with an army that is not the same army that he left. I think it was Southampton. I think where he left to come to France. So, but he decides against all advice, Henry, to march to Calais. He wants to parade throughout the French realms and show his English army and his right to rule as the king, and march through the towns and show these French people that, hey, your army's nowhere to be seen. I am the rightful king here. Your leaders have left you, and I'm marching freely through your countryside without challenge. And he's in deep, and he doesn't want to go home. He likes the fact that he's taken Harfleur, but he doesn't want just that. It's rumoured about whether he wanted to draw out the Dauphin, who is so basically at the time King Charles VI rules France, and I think the next, or basically the de facto leader of France at the time was the Dauphin, who is Louis, Duke of Guyenne, who was a third son of Charles VI. So it's not actually sure whether Henry wants to draw out the Dauphin into like a pitched battle or fighting, but he certainly wants to march to Calais, which is an English holding, and do so with a demonstration of might by marching through the French lowlands.
Bravado, basically, to just show his strength.
So the only problem in doing that, from marching to Harfleur to Calais, is that you have to cross a little river. What river might that be?
Agincourt?
No. That's the name of the town.
Rennes?
It's a really important river for Pint-Sized History podcast.
Is it the one, Somme?
Yes, the Somme River.
Right.
He needs to get from one side of the Somme River to the other side. But basically, the French army is shadowing the English army. They're on the other side of the bank. So they're basically following the French army, basically just like lurking behind them a few hours or an hours ahead or hours behind.
So this was the reality, that they were actually being followed, chased, as it
basically
were.
by this huge French army, enormous French army, and they're destroying bridges and blocking fords, because what they want to do is they want to get the English in a position where they have to cross the river in a position where the French are, which means it's you can't cross forwards, especially under arrow fire or cavalry charging you. It's going to be impossible, and the French are trying to draw Henry V across this, but he finds a ford at Bethencourt and Voyenne and marches and crosses it, and then gets his army across the river, away from the French, ahead of the French, and then marches north towards Calais. The French army then cut off the most direct route to Calais. And this is an area where they could basically redeploy to either side of one main road leading to Calais. And this essentially was the area between Agincourt and Tramcourt. And it was this wooden area, and later heralds decided on Agincourt. But this was the battlefield, this direct route to Calais,
this was it.
Which the French army have cut off.
So they know now the battle is imminent.
And they're coming together.
They can't avoid it.
They're in between Henry's army and Calais. And they position themselves there. And on the 24th of October... there's no delaying anymore, and both armies set up camp for what will be a battle the next morning. The French try to open negotiations with Henry. They try and delay him because they've got a rear vanguard and reinforcements of thousands of men coming up to support the French. They're in French land, so they can like pool nobles and armies together at the drop of a hat and get them to.
So they're trying to delay until they can guarantee.
They've got a huge army, but they can have an even bigger army. So they're trying to delay Henry from attacking them and going forward and forcing this battle. So the French tried to open negotiations with Henry to delay, and Henry's basically thinking, God, I've got this army that's travelled 260 miles in 2.5 weeks. They're suffering from disease. They're greatly outnumbered, which is insane. 260 miles in 2.5 weeks.
Yeah.
Traveled by an army with wagons and supplies behind them.
It's a lot.
Maybe sometimes marching in armour across this French countryside. You can only imagine the state of the troops at the time. But Henry is determined. And he knows that he wants to go for this fight. He's basically pushing away all instruction by nobles to delay and negotiate. And he has got himself into this mess. He is marched his army straight head on into the French army, and he
against the advices of his generals as well. Like, they were saying we should go back now.
Yeah, exactly.
Or we should
they wanted to go home after half learn.
and he's like paraded the army around, so he knows this is his mess.
And this is part of his intense ego. Like he believes he has this divine might and this divine rule over France, and he wants to show it. He believes God has his back and that he will win this battle, this war with the French, and cement himself as the rightful ruler of France. In doing so he has full confidence in himself, and he's an astute military leader. He's incredibly tactically adept, and I think he kind of backs himself because he knows that the French are in this kind of period of instability and fractiousness, and there's no real leader there.
And
the Dauphin, the Dauphin is not with the French troops. There's no king there. There's no representative of the king or heir, the Dauphin.
Yeah.
It is just a couple of marshals and dukes at the head of this French army.
Yeah.
And they have this like lack of governance that the English army have. They have Henry at the front, this smart guy who's making all decisions. He wants to test their mettle,
but also at the same time, he has, like you said before, is a quick learner. He is someone that has been fighting since he was 16, so over 10 years now, fighting in his own father's battles, where he has seen how his troops, he's seen tactics, he's seen the longbow, he's seen what works and what doesn't, and I think. If you are also backed by this belief, this arrogant belief that you are by divine right supposed to be the ruler of this country, then I think it would give you the confidence to go, okay, well, I know that this works for this, and I know that this works for this, and I know that I should be in charge. So you know what? I think we can do this, and I've just got to make sure that we set ourselves up right, and we make the battlefield the perfect place it can be, and get ourselves set up in the right way, inspire the troops, and let's go show the French that they've actually got no clue, even though they have superior numbers.
You've segued perfectly, because he does know that. Agincourt is I'm going to talk briefly about that, but it is the perfect battlefield for the English strategy of warfare.
Yeah.
It's a small commune in northern France, about 60 kilometres from Calais. Historians think it might be just to the west of the village itself, but it's basically the field of battle is a narrow strip set between two woods, which means that this English army holding the middle cannot be circumvented and wrapped around and hit from behind. The army is like the Battle of Thermopylae.
Yeah.
The numbers of the French army don't count for that much here.
Or King Darius, where he sets up his army on the coast next to the mountains, and suddenly his 2 times superior numbers can't do anything. And
Absolutely, yeah.
Alexander the Great is able to use, his army to a better extent. It's a classic case of one leader preparing, using everything in their scenario, and the other leader ignoring it.
Also, the field is muddy and brown. It's been freshly ploughed, which means that these cavalry that the French so rely on. French, while the English are a archer nation, we love our bowmen, our longbowmen. We love being ranged and innovative, and obviously we have our navy as well. But at this time, the French were well known for their cavalry. Their cavalry are great shock troops, elite units who batter through lines of archers and men at arms. This muddy battlefield completely negates that. But I was thinking, as part of that, Agincourt is somewhere I desperately want to go to. I was thinking, what other parts or areas come to your head straight away do you think you'd like to go to as part of the podcast? Surely the Somme.
Yeah, Somme. Obviously D-Day, Normandy.
2 places in France. 3 places in France.
3 places in France. Well, just a lot of battles happen in France, man. And we've yet to do a single Napoleonic episode, which I'm sure at some point we probably will. And when we do that, we'll be talking about things that happened in France or just in mainland Europe anyway. I mean, obviously, we'd both love to go to Stalingrad. But that's not going to happen anytime soon.
Iwo Jima?
Yeah, I'd like to go to, Guadalcanal or any of the... Honestly,
I haven't even been to Rome,
I would love to... Oh, Rome,
Never
of course.
been to Rome.
Yeah, Rome, well, we should, obviously. But
Athens?
Athens, yeah, absolutely. Oh, I mean, look, the list could go on. We're gonna lose our time if we jump through all the places. Why not fucking...
Hey, if any embassies...
The White House, remember when we burned it down, man? Remember that?
If anyone wants to get in touch and take us these places free of charge, we can record a podcast there with the right equipment. We would love that. so please.
So ambitious. That is so ambitious.
Yeah, well, enough of that. Let's get on to Agincourt, shall we? The morning of the 25th of October, Henry has set his army.
What year?
1415.
1415. October the 25th, 1415.
Yeah. Henry sets his army in the narrowest part of the passage, surrounded by the two wooden enclaves around the towns of Tramcourt and Agincourt. He deploys his army, 1,500 men-at-arms and 7,000 longbowmen, into three groups. The right, led by Edward, the Duke of York, a grandson of Edward III.
Go on, Eddie.
Great king.
Yep.
He held the centre himself, which is where he likes his fighting. He likes being right in the middle of everything. And this is what makes him a great king. Just that, like we said earlier, that just like the lack of fear to serve right alongside your man, and your knights and your men-at-arms.
Absolutely.
This is where most of the fighting occurs. It's a bloody, horrible melee. Or melee? What'd you say?
Melee.
Melee. Okay, melee.
Yeah, I mean, melee is just the way that when you read it as an English man, you would...
Yeah, it should be melee, right?
It sounds like melee, but it's melee. It's melee.
Yeah.
It's a French word.
And he puts the left wing under the command of Thomas Camoys, who's a baron and a very experienced soldier at the time. And importantly, what Henry decides to do brilliantly is put his longbowmen on either side, behind the men-at-arms in the centre, defended in their positions by long wooden stakes, basically put all around their positions.
Yeah.
So they're in like these fortified areas with the wood on their right or on their left, depending on what side of the battlefield they are, and spikes around them in the front and the sides to basically mean that they cannot be attacked by cavalry charges. The lines of English knights were stacked in plate and mail, 4 rows deep, making this solid row of metal. And before the fighting, you get your chaplain, and they'd come to you and they bless the English troops and tell you,
as any good Christian should do. Bless us all.
Rescued in pace.
Yeah, and tell us all, like, you know, you're going to heaven and God loves you and all this stuff. Now go kill him.
And the night before as well, which is really, really interesting as well, they were in complete silence. Henry was so paranoid about a French sabotage or raid on their camp that he ordered his whole camp, his whole army, to be in complete silence the entire night, which is an army of 10,000 men. Yeah. Apparently they abided by that out of fear that if they did, Henry would cut off their ears, which is quite kind of cool, but also horrible. So that's an army of like 8,000 men, I think. I got to about that, or 9,000 men. And some of them might still be quite unwell from some of the marching and that, and exhaustion, disease they encountered from Harfleur. The French army, meanwhile, is enormous. It's 10,000 men at arms, 5,000 other footmen, including archers, crossbowmen, pavese crossbowmen. Potentially, some sources suggest they could have been as many as 25,000 French people there, French soldiers there, including their rear vanguard, which would take them up to around a 4-to-1 outnumbering of the English army, which is insane. The French have organised their army into a vanguard comprised of cavalry, and they have loads of mounted knights ready to smash through the English lines.
The vanguard is the units at the front of the army. Literally, the vanguard is the people. The guard that is at the very front, while the rear guard is the people that are at the very back of an army. So if you're at the vanguard, you're where the fighting. You're
right in the front line.
You're going to front line, and it's going to be where the fighting's thickest, and it's going to be tough.
If you're in the vanguard and you're at the Somme, you're literally, when the whistle goes, you're over the top and you're running across no man's land. You're the first person across. But they've also got a smaller force of cavalry, and this is their big plan, is to envelop the English, is to hit them head on with an enormous amount of vast lines of cavalry and armoured knights. Yeah. And then envelop round and hit them at the back with the rear, with a smaller elite cavalry force. And all the nobles of the French wanted to be in the vanguard. They were so certain that they would, as soon as they hit the English lines, they would rout and they would just abandon their positions and run away, and it'd be a slaughter. And they wanted the glory of killing Henry V and killing his knights. Yeah.
And shows to the arrogance of the French that they believed that this was going to be a big dub for them. Yeah. And hey, didn't happen.
And because of their greed, of their want to be right at the front, their ranks were deep, 16 men deep, just in this first vanguard, potentially around 8,000 men in this tight formation, sprinting and charging at the English lines. Yeah. There were so many Frenchmen there who wanted to be in this first assault. There was no room for archers or crossbowmen or any utility troops. So they're just truly convinced that this will be their day and they will destroy the English here.
You want that confidence. As a French noble, the Dauphin or whoever, you'll be buzzing that they all feel that confident. The problem is it ends up being their downfall.
History is available now. Like you can read, I'm sure, in libraries or monasteries at the time about like rulers in the past who have overcompensated, overthought that thought they had the right of the day and would win it, and then were defeated by exceptional margins. But they have no regard for that at all.
No,
they're just absolutely convinced in their own might. And it is a part of the French arrogance. Like I don't want to pile on what we were saying about the French, but at this time they do not want to be led by Englishmen or women. They want to be led by pure French blood. Yeah. And they don't have the same sort of appreciation for other cultures and other societies as maybe others might. But maybe that's like a thing.
I mean,
to
be fair,
it could be the case across different countries.
We are their eternal enemy as well. By that point, we've been fighting with them for so long. I mean, Jesus.
But we're so joint at the hip. Like, our cultures are so intertwined.
Yeah.
French and English cultures are Normandy. So obviously you got William the Conqueror. You have like Duke Rollo, who's a Viking, and the Vikings attacked and conquered England too. We're joined by our Viking history and both William the Conqueror. We fought wars together later on in the 20th century, but
the English and French history is outrageously
still animosity today.
Up to the Romans. Remember, the Romans conquered Gaul and then they conquered Britannica. It was the Romans literally. We were all part of the same alliance, and since the Romans disbanded and we became our own nations, we basically either fought with them extremely heavily or we have loved them like a brother because we need each other. It's a fascinating history. It's such
a strange history, and also it feels weird and forced sometimes. Like when you watch, like, even very recently, I probably shouldn't comment on this because of my job, but like you see Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron together, and Starmer showing. I saw a recent video where Keir Starmer showed Emmanuel Macron around like the Churchill rooms or something in Downing Street, and he was like, "Yeah, you can see the cigar burns on the couch," and he's like trying to be cool and play it off, but like, they're getting on very well. I don't know.
Could you not tell if they were?
I mean, it looked like quite pally, but. It just feels forced as well.
Of course, but all that stuff, all that
the world is a good place when England and France are friendly. I think we're a great alliance at the best of times, and when things go bad, it's truly fucked up when we get into each other.
Luckily for the past few hundred years, England and France, pretty much since Napoleon, have been good allies. In every conflict, so we're lucky in that sense.
I love France. I went to Lyon last year and I loved it. I think it's a really lovely city, and I love French like exports, like their food, their wine. I don't know what we're getting onto here.
Their culture in general. I mean, the banter is always there. The French do this and the French do that, and the English hate the French and the French hate the English and all that. But in reality, I think most people that. I think we can accept that actually our histories are so intertwined that you can't help but respect each other. Even if I love the fact that we have a once-over on Agincourt and we get to batter them in this one battle in 1415. It's a very interesting and varied history. In reality, as much as we like to shit on them, the French are almost as good an ally as anyone we could ask for at this point.
Yeah, it's a shame that Brexit fucked that up. But I won't talk about Brexit. I always want to, and I won't.
Yes.
The morning of 25th October 1415, Henry V addresses his troops. And he obviously makes a great speech. And Shakespeare's one, in my opinion, is fantastic. So I'm just going to...
Henry V...
we don't know if it's what he said, but...
I mean, there's no way he said that. But this is... I think, regardless of if it's true at all, I think this is a very noble, heroic interpretation of what Henry V would have been like at the battle, on the morning of the battle. And if you want anyone to write a future speech about what you did in the past, it's Shakespeare.
It's got to be Shakespeare, right?
So
here we are. And I'll do my best to not butcher it. If we are marked to die, we are enough to do our country loss, and if to live, the fewer men, the greatest share of honour. God's will, I pray thee, wish not one man more. By Jove, I am not covetous for gold, not care who doth feed upon my cost. It yearns me not if men my garments wear. Such outward things do not my desires. But if it be a sin to covet honour, I am the most offending soul alive. Rather proclaim it, Westmoreland, through my host, that he which hath no stomach to this fight, let him depart. His passport shall be made, and crowns for convoy put into his purse. We would not die in that man's company, that fears his fellowship to die with us. This day is called the Feast of Crispian. He that outlives this day and comes safe home will stand a tiptoe when this day is named, and rouse him at the name of Crispian. He that shall live this day and see old age will yearly on his vigil feast his neighbours and say, tomorrow is St. Crispian. Then he will strip his sleeve and show his scars and say, these wounds I had on Crispin's day. Old men forget, yet all shall be forgot. But he'll remember, with advantages, what feats he did that day. Then shall our names, familiar in his mouth as household words, Harry the King, Bedford and Exeter, Warwick and Talbot, Salisbury and Gloucester, be in their flowing cups freshly remembered. This story shall the good man teach his son, and Crispian shall ne'er go by, from this day to the ending of the world, but we in it shall be remembered. We few, we happy few, we band of brothers. For he today that sheds his blood with me shall be my brother, but he ne'er so vile. This day shall gentle his condition, and gentlemen in England now abed shall think themselves accursed they were not here, and hold their manhoods cheap, whilst any speaks that foughts with us on St. Crispin's Day. And that's
Nice.
it. And oh God,
What a beautiful speech.
yeah,
Well
I'm
done,
getting
mate.
emotional.
Well done. That was really good.
Right, the battle. We've done that. I love Shakespeare.
Well, I'm hyped now.
I'm feeling
Let's go
dizzy
kill
now.
some French. I love the French. Let's go kill them.
This is what happens. The order of battle. The French army charged the longbowmen to kill the sides of Henry's army immediately. It was a horrible attempt, incredibly costly. They ran into this spiked palisades of the English defences. They couldn't wrap around the woods because they were too thick to hit
And the
them
mud,
from the backside.
right? And the mud.
And the
as
mud,
well?
yep. I'll get onto that shortly.
Okay.
But they were shocked. They couldn't pierce the English sides, and the horses got out of control. They were confronted with hails of arrow fire,
Yes.
and in pointy spikes that basically caused them to like go into a frenzy and charge back across the battlefield
chaos.
into the French line, which just muddied up.
So it's the
ground
French
even
that
more.
start it in the morning. They're the ones that charge
yeah.
first, and they've made a huge blunder right out the gate.
Absolutely, yeah. And a lot of the wounded horses trampled back through the French lines, trampling even more men on the way through. Probably not killing very many, but still churning up the ground, causing disorganization and threatening the day already.
Yeah.
The main assault then comes from the French army, advancing through terrifying volleys of arrows, hundreds and thousands of arrows fired every minute, every second possibly, until the English longbowmen have run out of run out of arrows. Sorry. They're picking off these men-at-arms as they advance. And it's debated whether these longbowmen could pierce plate mail, but they certainly can pierce mail armour. And there have been like modern tests done by YouTubers and historians who suggest that longbowmen could pierce plate armour. So they're being rained down on by this like shower of arrows. And while it's not maybe killing them, it's at least wounding them or causing them problems or killing some of the less well-armoured people. So the French knights had to run through this horrible muddy terrain. They've got to run through maybe 100, 200 meters, wearing armor weighing 25 kilos till they reach the French center in this churned up mud. So they're basically completely exhausted by the time that they reach the English lines. They're wearing all this armor. They've been basically hit with thousands of arrows, and now they've got to smash into the English center, and they've got to go into this bloody melee. French collide with the English center. They push the English back slightly, but this doesn't continue for very long. The English longbowmen, seeing that the French line was too close for them to use their longbowmen, and they started running out of arrows, basically dropped their bows, picked up swords, hatchets, mallets, and this is one of the most important developments of the day. It's something they very, very well illustrate in The King, the movie. They come out the sides, out of the woods, out of their defensive positions, in their lightly armoured garb, having no problem navigating the muddy terrain, and engage really, really bravely, fully plate armoured, walking heaps of metal.
That are exhausted by this point, basically.
They're tired, disorderly, massed up in front of them, easy pickings, and they pick them off stuck in the mud.
Yeah.
The French apparently were so exhausted they couldn't even lift their weapons. Some knights might have even drowned in the mud or suffocated in their armour and were killed in the thousands, potentially 6,000 in the first hour or so of fighting. The fighting lasted around 3 hours. The second French line was also killed or captured or defeated or routed. King Henry V, our great warrior king, was right in the middle of the entire process. He's fighting in the middle, and even in doing so, he suffers an axe blow to his head, which doesn't pierce his helmet, but chips off part of the crown he is wearing. He's wearing a crown in the middle of the battlefield.
That's so risky, because like the
insane.
second anyone sees that crown, they go, "That's the king."
And
Let's get him.
in medieval wars as well, if you kill the king or kill the person who's fighting the claim, typically the battle's ended.
Yeah,
They go. Oh shit! Well,
the king's
there's
dead.
no point in fighting now. The king's dead. It's over.
Run.
They'll
We're
retreat.
screwed.
There's no point in it. Like the whole point of this battle is to push your king's claim.
Well,
and if
yeah.
your king's dead, there's
honestly,
no
I
claim.
don't think in the heat of the melee,
won't
I don't
end.
think that's
Yeah,
what they're
yeah.
thinking. I think they're more just thinking, "Shit, our
gotta
leader's dead.
survive."
I now have to think about my own survival."
He's fighting hand to hand right now, and just like that, after the first charge of the French, after the longbowmen dropping spears, the French clash into the middle, the English centre, the battle's over.
Yeah.
It's finished.
Just like that.
It's over in 3 hours.
Yeah.
And think about what modern battle lasts that long.
It can last
It
days
lasts
and
weeks,
days.
months, hours, and thousands of French people are dead. And in that, I'll come to this shortly, but there are an insane amount of French nobility, which completely, we try not to swear, but fucks the French leadership, their government, their politics. Half of them are dead at this battlefield.
Yeah.
But the French, it is worth saying, the French did enjoy some success. They did route round with their special cavalry units and hit the rear, the baggage train of the English, and they did cause some casualties among the English back there, because these are like unarmored squires and people traveling with the baggage trains, which has like weapons and ammunition and stuff like that. They apparently even seized Henry's personal treasures, including one of his crowns.
Wow. Okay. Enjoy that.
Yeah.
We'll take your crown.
But Henry, because he knew that the French might come from the rear, does something which sticks with him in history. And it's why some historians think that he might not be as great a king as possible. And at this time, there was this idea of chivalry. French and English,
especially in
chivalry.
French and English culture.
Yeah, of a kind of sparing the man, good Christians, good virtues.
Sparing, not the man, because again, this is the classic case of Christianity favouring those that have the power and the riches.
Yeah.
They didn't not care about the average soldier whatsoever, regardless of if they're Catholic or not. What they care about is the noble, and they consider them, Catholic blood that cannot be spilled.
Peasants can get killed.
Peasants can get killed like anything, but the noble and the knight, those are people that should be considered sacrilegious, and this is the problem.
Yeah, and Henry does something which sticks with him into modern history today, and I think the debate about Henry being a great king has been fairly solid until recently because of these developments, but he basically kills potentially, and it's rumored about the historical validity of how many prisoners, because they retreat, they surrender, they're over, they've routed and captured thousands of French prisoners, and apparently so many prisoners that they outnumber the English army. And Henry is so scared about an attack by the French prisoners picking up arms and attacking the English army, he kills them in the thousands potentially. Potentially not. It could be around a couple of hundred. It could be a few hundred. It could be peasants sparing the nobles. But if it is the case, and this marks his legacy with like an intense kind of like blackness to it.
It does. Obviously it does. But you say that as if like he's one of the only ones to have done something like that. But let's face it, like especially in medieval times, everyone was so
Not
brutal.
because ransoming is really important here.
Yeah.
Typically in a battle like, and in the medieval times, you would take prisoners because you ransom them back.
You would take your rich
and
prisoners,
also you don't want to spill fellow Christian blood, which is like the main important thing.
But I'm saying that yes, this was an extreme example, but it is not an isolated incident. This does happen throughout history. Obviously I get that this enters the debate of how great was he, and I don't want to like put my own argument in there. I'm just saying that in general, it's not as if this was like completely out of the blue. This is never done. People do kill if they have to, and that happens in medieval times up to
D-Day as well.
Exactly, like the prisoners of war are often sacrificed if there's any danger or any worry, especially in the moment. And this is literally like right after the battle, right? This isn't like. I'm not defending it, but this is literally the battles. It's still in the mind, like this concept of like fighting. He's still probably got the bloodlust. I mentioned to you about Alexander the Great. He kills a bunch of Greek mercenaries straight away. He could have sold them. He could have sold them home, but they've just joined the battle at the end of it. They're Greek. And he decides to just kill them straight away.
To argue that point, like in 500 BC, there's not these ideas of chivalry.
Yeah,
there's not like
this,
like being, I don't know if it's gentleman or like being knights, right? You're knighted. You're an exceptionally virtuous individual. battle. You're not going to go around killing prisoners who are like unarmed and can't defend themselves. It's mercy. It's good Christian mercy.
Yeah, of course. They are different times. I'm just saying, I bet you that that happens maybe more so than it's led to believe. I'm sure there are plenty of examples of chivalrous knights and battles in the English, French, medieval times where they still did that same thing. This is probably the most extreme example and the most famous examples. But I just don't think it's as isolated as maybe it's been made out.
Yeah. No, good points. I agree. The battle's ended. We have the final cost and the tally in the aftermath of the battle. It was a chaotic, horrible fight for the French, and it's ended in a costly defeat.
Yeah,
they've lost around 6,000 men, potentially many more, and loads of prisoners beyond that. They've also lost 100 great lords, including dukes, and these dukes are enormously powerful landowners and holding titles that could have equaled Henry's father before he became king. So like swaves of France. But the Dukes of Alençon, Bar, and Brabant, 9 counts, an archbishop, the French constable was killed, an admiral, the master of crossbowmen, the master of the royal household, 3,000 knights, which is an enormous number of really well-trained units with lots of money.
Takes a lot to make you a knight.
Absolutely, yeah. Many corpses didn't actually have coats of arms on the battlefields. They couldn't identify them, so it could have been many more than that. And the prisoners included 2,000 of them, potentially even more. But including in there is the Duke of Orleans, Bourbon, and a number of counts and marshals. Estimates of the English dead range from very little, maybe around 112, which is the lowest estimate, which is incredible. You've killed literally 60 times the amount of dead you have, to somewhere between 600 and 1,600.
As overwhelming a victory as you could ask for, basically.
To somewhere between 600 and 1,600.
It probably beats Henry's expectations, like anyone's expectations of how successful this battle has been.
I would say fairly, like we always do in Pint-Sized history, we say somewhere in the middle. It's where we typically lie. Yeah. And I'd say about 1,000 men probably died.
Yeah.
And if you're saying still, you've lost 1,000 men, maybe wounded a couple hundred of them, but you've taken 9,000 people, either prisoner, dead, many more wounded. It's a pretty convincing
It's one of our
victory.
biggest success stories of war, really.
And following the fighting, Henry returns to England and has a huge parade in London on the 23rd November, around a month later. It cemented Henry as a king, uniting subjects, a conquering hero, blessed by God. And it also gives him, in his eyes, just cause to go back to France and finish what he started.
Exactly.
And because of the damage he'd done to the French households, the political order, and the armies they have, he returns with a new campaign, a new financed, prepared campaign 18 months later, following Agincourt. The Holy Roman Empire, in the meantime, makes appeals and demands to Henry to lower his demands and try and demand less of the French,
right?
To stop further Christian bloodshed.
Yeah.
Henry has some respect for the emperor, Sigismund at the time, but and Sigismund also recognises the claims that Henry has to France, which is a big development. Basically, legitimises what Henry's doing. And in 1417, he embarks on another campaign against the French. He goes again to France. Like he does, he loves fighting. He captures Caen, Normandy, Rouen. And at Rouen, he brutally besieged it. This is one of the other dark moments of Henry's reign. He basically, his actions besieging the city led to the deaths by starvation of thousands of women and children trying to escape the castle, which is horrendous.
No defending that one.
He's severely punished any resistors, so noblemen who might have killed English garrisons or something like that. And in January 1419, he finally conquers Rouen. In August 1419, he reaches Paris, and after 6 months around the city, negotiates with Charles VI. And they come to what's called the Treaty of Troyes, or Troyes, probably, which recognises Henry as the heir of France on Charles VI's death. He also marries Catherine, Charles' daughter, who's Catherine of Valois.
Uniting the thrones, basically.
Uniting the thrones, and basically meaning that their son, Henry VI, would be the next ruler of France should Charles die before Henry V.
Right.
Catherine of Valois, who Henry's new wife, the French king's daughter, has a really intriguing history. And I've seen some recent content on her online, and it's fascinating. She basically rules as a regent following Henry's death in name of her son. And I'll come to this shortly. And she has like affairs and is responsible for a lot of policy at the time, and it's really quite fascinating. And I'm sure maybe we'll dive into it maybe some seasons down the line, because there is a good story there. He marries Catherine and has one son, Henry VI, who's born the 6th of December 1421 at Windsor Castle. But within that, and before his son is born, Henry goes in June to July of 1420, besieging, capturing French castles. His brother Thomas, who's leading the English forces in France while he's back in England, dies to a defeat against the Scottish and French army. And Henry then goes back to France in June 1421 to fix the situation, because it's getting out of hand and the English army are losing. He's going back there to address it, fix it, cement his claim, take more castles. France is in like a period of civil war. Everyone's attacking everyone. There's the Burgundy and the Armagnacs, and they all hate each other, and they all want the French kingdom, and they don't want this English king at the helm of it. So Henry's constantly got to be over there, putting down rebellions,
putting out
taking
fires,
on armies,
basically.
conquering castles, basically diplomacy. And they besiege and capture more French castles in 1421, such as Dreux and Meaux. And this is where our hero meets his untimely end.
Yeah. Henry V doesn't survive for that long.
Don't take my glory away from me. I've done the research.
I mean, it's quite clear what you're about to say.
In May 1422, a year after coming back to France to fix the situation, at the siege of Meaux, he contracts dysentery. This can go away fairly quickly, but it develops into smallpox, we believe. Another bacterial infection.
Big yikes.
And another couple of infections, and maybe even leprosy like his father has. He goes to the Chateau de Vincennes to recover, and he does. He actually he decides on leading his armies again against the Dauphin's forces later on. Dauphin's still alive and kicking around. But apparently while riding in full armour on a hot summer's day after having the illness, he goes into a relapse. He has heat stroke, he faints, he falls off his horse, and is in a bad way. He didn't recover from these illnesses. He returns to Paris, and eventually, a few weeks later, goes back to the Chateau de Vincennes, and around August 1422, dies there. He leaves his brother John as regent of France in his name, in the name of his son Henry VI, who's only a few months old, and he was 35 years old when he died. He'd reigned for 9 years, and unfortunately, he didn't live long enough to become the King of France, which was expected of the Treaty of Troyes, because Charles VI outlived him.
Yeah.
And by the way, Charles VI thinks he's made of glass. He's old and he's legitimately crazy. He's really ill and unwell. But these French kings, they live into their long ages. He was brought back to England by John Sutton and buried in Westminster Abbey on the 7th of November 1422.
I feel like, similar to the Alexander the Great episode, the stories of these two young generals are like, they do these really ridiculous achievements at a young age, or a younger age than maybe the norm or whatever. They achieve these things, and then before they can reach, because I believe Alexander the Great was 32 when he died, which, you know, isn't necessarily super young, but it's, you know, it's absolutely not at the peak or getting into his old age. And they both die of just a disease or an illness that is completely unexpected. And it's a shame that, it's not a shame, this is just how history is, but it's interesting how this completely changes everything. There's literally a timeline in the world where either Alexander the Great or Henry V are able to go out and do many more things in their adventures and their conquests, and we'll never know it because they died before they achieved everything that they wanted to achieve. Alexander the Great wanted to conquer Saudi Arabia and go further into India, maybe Southeast Asia. And Henry V, who knows, maybe Henry V might have gone even further than France after his conquest.
Absolutely. It's gone too soon, I'd say.
Yeah.
It's really important for Henry V and the future of England to talk about what happens after his death. And it's really essential to the whole story as a whole, but the political situation was literally united behind Henry. Henry was the only figure holding this whole like chaotic mess together, because he was so admirable and credible as a man that people would unite behind him. Barons,
he just had so much legitimacy after such a huge victory.
Absolutely.
Basically.
So his son Henry VI eventually came of age, and then when he did, he lost all the holdings in France that Henry V and his regent government in his stead had kept safe. And that kind of marks the end of English successes in the 100 Years' War, when Henry VI kind of undoes his father's successes, which is quite sad.
Yeah.
This terrible outcome.
Classic though.
This terrible outcome, that this end of the 100 Years' War and a bitter defeat for the English eventually then leads to the War of the Roses,
Yes.
plunging England into civil war.
Two very famous wars in the history of our country that happened like back to back, basically.
And direct causes of one another.
Yeah.
Some historians suggest that because of this, Henry was not as great a ruler as we think of him to be. I think that's a poor take. I think I want to remember him to be remembered as this iconic warrior king who, against all odds, defeated this enormous French army, cemented and kind of upheld and maintained the politics and nobility of these two great countries. But he left, unfortunately, a vacuum in his untimely death because he kept seeking war and putting himself in positions where he'd get eventually horrible diseases.
Yeah, I don't think it's particularly fair to say that Henry V wasn't a legendary ruler of England because of the fact that he died young and therefore didn't leave anything behind.
Yeah.
By that same logic, then Alexander,
legacy's so important.
Alexander
though,
the
right?
Great is therefore not a great
He's
ruler
left the
because
legacy
his empire was gone like that. It's literally carved up within years.
By his generals, though. So Alexander's empire was carved up by his generals, which means that he's still got like Alexandrian influence in these areas.
Sure, but come on.
With Henry, there's no influence. His legacy is undone immediately. So
I
what
don't
type of
know.
king
I don't think that's true.
I don't agree with it either.
I don't think that's necessarily true.
No.
I think that Alexander the Great, in that by that same practice, he left no way to keep. I mean, mate, his legend was his empire, and he wasn't able to keep it. Sure, his generals might have carved it up for themselves, but that's not the same thing. Yeah. I just think that, it's just a classic case of what could have been, but I don't think that's really how you can debate what someone. If someone's a great leader or not, or ruler or not, I think it's more to do
look
with
at their actions when they're alive. Right?
Exactly, when they're alive. And if they died of an illness that they weren't expected to, then I don't think that's particularly fair to put such a mark on the black stain on their legacy going forward after that. If he died in battle because he was an idiot and fought when he shouldn't have, sure, that's something else. But to die of an illness, unless he was kissing pigs, that's not, that's on, sure. Yeah, if he's kissing pigs and gets some illness from it, then fair enough. But otherwise, I don't think it's particularly fair.
And on that note, we should probably end. That's it. That's the story
well done, mate. Woo!
Of Henry V.
Thank you for taking us through that.
I love it. I think it's truly fascinating. And what I was thinking whilst researching this was, imagine he did survive. Imagine he doesn't die at a young age. Do you think France and England could be one country?
I was actually thinking about this like a few minutes earlier. I was thinking, like, was there ever a scenario where we could have just kept them together? And I don't think so. Probably I think they're two. I just think France and England are so culturally divided in many ways that I think it was always fate that we were going to start fighting again.
There is.
But yeah, thank you, mate. I appreciate the story. Thank you. I appreciate it.
As always, thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the podcast, please like, subscribe, leave a comment, leave a review. It's always really appreciated. Tell your friends about us. Tell your family. Tell your grandparents. Tell your nephews, your nieces.
Yes.
Let them know.
And tell your local breweries. And while we're on the subject of breweries, thank you again, Crate.
Thank you, Crate. Delightful beer. I'm probably going to go to them in a few weeks' time to go to the Hackney pub. It's a good pub, so I'll go there. We'll go together.
A few weeks?
What?
Let's go tomorrow.
How about tonight? Still time left.
Yeah, that's true. All right, well, yeah, anyway.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.